Hey, this is Pierre de working in Applied Technologies. Let's talk about Champions Program. I have a video that explains why you should do Champions Program. So now I'm going to do a video about the step-by-step that you need to follow to build your Champions Program. What's really in the Champions Program. So let's see that. Hope this is going to disappear. Okay. So first you need to define the gives and gets. As every program, when you're soliciting people to help you to scale the change, you need to define what they need to give and what they're going to get. So I think the first step is to, among the project team, is to define what kind of gives and gets you want to define. So then the gives, it's just a summary of the gives. So mainly they're going to give their time. So they're going to give their time to explore the new technology, the digital transformation. So it's self-exploration, if I can say so. They're going to learn. They're going to also, when they explore that, they better understand the ins and outs, and they better understand what they can do with the technology, the platform. Um, then they can educate others. That's probably most of the time will be spent first, maybe in the first phase, will be spent to learn and then to educate. And by the way, when you educate people, you learn even better. That's the best way to learn. And they're gonna give their time to help and support their peers, their coworkers. So it's time. They need some time to do that, to help, answering questions, walking through people through what's new, and they need to do so in a reactive mode, but also in a proactive mode. So you need to share proactively their knowledge they need that they learned. They need to share maybe use cases, everything that can help their peers. They should share that transparently with their peers. And finally, they're an amplifier of the voice of the project. So whenever a message is sent, they need to be sure that people understood it, received it, didn't zap it, especially when it goes through email. So they need to rehearse, repeat the message, so and maybe translate it into their context. So that are gives, and what do they get? So they're gonna have a preview access to the platform, to the technology, to the transformation. They're going to receive some education. So you need to, if you want them to be advocate for the change, you need to educate them, and not only about the technology, not only about use cases, but maybe also about some guidelines, some behaviors that you need to change. So a lot of education need to be provided to the champions. You're gonna have a team that's gonna support them too. So they don't have all the answers. So it's not just a bunch of people gonna learn by themselves. You need to support them. You need to educate them. You need to answer their questions. It's not only about questions about the technology. It can be questions about the project. The process of the project, the governance, everything that is tied to the project need to be answered by the project team to the champions. And usually, what we see, a lot of champions community receive rewards. So, it can be individual rewards or global rewards. There are several ways to reward people. We'll address it a little bit later. But it's really important to recognize the work of the champions. It's on top of their working day, so it's some sort of effort. Even if you don't want people to feel it's an effort, maybe you want them to be passionate about it. So when you're passionate, it's not felt like, as an effort. You can also give them visibility. That's another example of a reward. You know, being a champion, uh, even the word has a meaning that is visible, and you should, as a project team, you should give them some visibility internally, so they know what their role are and what they're doing and how impactful they are. And finally, I think what most important, at least for me, is self-satisfaction, because when you're helping each other, when you help your peers, that's a source of satisfaction. It's really, um, you know, people love to help other people. That's the common pattern in the human being in general. So helping each other is really brings satisfaction, and also this way you learn more. Even you're not only learning, you know, because when you help people who have an issue, you try to understand what they're trying to achieve, what is their problem, and you learn even more about their job, maybe about the product, because you're going to find a solution that you might not know right away. So you learn a lot on the soft skill side and hard skill side. So there are the gives and gets. So what are the you need to define? Secondly, you need to define the roles and responsibilities. So um, I think the champions um, community, there is first you have to have a community lead that's gonna take care of the you know, animating, curating, um, supervising the community. It's just like a community manager, so a community lead for the champions. I recommend not to take somebody from the project team, neither from IT. I will recommend to take somebody um, in in um in the champions community, one of the champion, and try to find somebody who has drive, who can federate, and who is on top of things, who's on top of organizing the meetings, who's gonna be celebrating, who's gonna be, you know, connecting people, who's gonna maybe answer some questions regarding the champions program. You know, a real lead, a champions lead. So let's call it community lead. Then there's the project manager. So you're deploying a set of technology. So you have a project manager who is managing the project as a whole, not just the change, but also the technical part, the governance part. So you want to involve the project manager just to be sure that the champions are aware of the project updates. Where are we with the project? What are the next phase? What are the eventual issues that people are um, encountering? So that's another another person that is important in the champions community. Then there's the SMEs. So you need to involve the people who can answer some technical questions. You know, so uh, you you deploy new technology. There probably gonna be some technical questions. Sometimes it's very technical. Sometimes it's just about some usage that people don't master, don't understand. Sometimes they need guidance. So the SMEs have the knowledge about those technical questions. So you need to invite the SMEs to be able to answer those questions. Sometimes it's rare, but you can have help desk people, but they don't have time really for that. But you could include help desk people at least in the champions community. You can add them just to answer asynchronously the question, maybe not to be part of the meetings, but that's an option. And I added an educator, instructor, call it how you want, but usually there are two kind of uh, customer I'm working with. There are customer where IT is delivering um, the education, and their IT who's having specialists who have better education skills. Usually, what works the best is when you really have educator, because first the SMEs, they're, you know, overwhelmed with other projects or even this project to deploy. They don't have time. Second, they don't know much about the technology. It's a new technology, so they might not know everything, especially, you know, how to use it. They might be able to answer some technical question, but how to use it, what are the scenarios, educating people. They don't have the education skills, to be didactic, to train people. So that's why usually we recommend to have an educator or several educators to um, educate the champions on, new technology, new products. And finally, there's a champions community. So they you have a number of champions. We'll discuss that a little bit later, but um, they're part of this community, and that's important that they're aligned with all the groups. So you need to this at this step, you need to identify who's going to be, your community lead, your project manager, your SMEs. You probably know who's a project manager and SMEs, but assign those people to this program and tell them, inform them. Also, you need to define some communication process. What is a communication process? So, first, the communication avenues. When you're going to communicate with the champions, there's several ways to communicate. If you don't have, Teams environment yet, maybe you should use email. I think that's maybe sometimes the only way to communicate. So if you do that, use a DL, distribution list, and put all the champions distribution list so everybody is informed. But the best way is to have a Microsoft Teams or even a social network like Yammer if you have Yammer. But Microsoft Teams, and if you, for example, if you're deploying Teams in the process of this transformation, you start with a DL and then you transition to Microsoft Teams, and then they will see the transition. It's going to be a new experience, real life experience for them. So don't be bothered by starting with DL and transitioning to Teams, and in general, don't think that all the program is set in stones and at the beginning and nothing's going to change. The whole purpose of the transformation is change all the time. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to adjust all the time, and we'll discuss that later. And finally, another avenue to communicate, which is really important, is the community calls. So the community calls are very important. So the champions lead, community lead needs to be sure that people are coming. He needs to track, to provide that, because that's where you're gonna share some message, answer some questions, and educate the champions. So you want to be sure that people are part of those community calls and they can have a voice and they can learn. What kind of communication resources you want to prepare? So you need to figure out, and prepare those resources. So I think I think I will put on top of the list the guidelines, because it's not just about learning how to use the tools, but it's also what is important is to learn how to work together, how to be aligned. So you need to have some guidelines, what I call sometimes digital etiquette, so people understand, not only the product, but also they understand how they should work together so it's aligned, especially when you do collaboration. If people sometimes are using email to attach documents, and others are using Teams, and others are going to use SharePoint or whatever, there's a misalignment, and I see that in a lot of organizations who have a set of tools where there are overlap, and the first complaint is, we don't work the same way, and this is a mess. We don't know how to work together, so that creates silos, and people don't work well together. So you need to provide some guidelines, define what kind of guidelines you want to provide to the champions, and also what topic you want to address, and just be sure that those guidelines are on par with everybody. You can even present those guidelines to the champions and collect feedback to see what is the best alignment we want to build, and discuss that, and build this kind of common governance, how to use the technology. Then you have the usual tips and tricks, and you can from time to time share some tips and tricks about some features you want to highlight depending on where you are in the deployment. You don't want to provide everything right away, but maybe sometimes, especially when you discuss with the champions, you can find out that there's some features are not very well understood, mastered, and so you want to highlight some of them so you can share some tips and tricks. A good thing also is to share use cases. So use cases is more complex, so it's more in meaning rather than in documentation. But it's, for example, how do you work? Um, how do you start a project? Where you start? Where are you going to store the documents? How are you going to organize information, etc.? What tool are you going to use? So that's a use case that they help people to align on the way to manage a project, for example. So that you can build some use cases that are common to most of the people, and maybe ask champions when they have experience to give you some feedback on their use cases, so to see if it resonates with the rest of the champions. You can have a micro learning platform so people can learn when they have the time to learn. So that's why micro learning is important. I think long training like LinkedIn learning is a little bit can be, some people might like it, but do you have really the time to spend an hour to for full training, even online? That's like might be hard. If you have a micro learning, you learn it really quickly, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, something that is important. And as a champions community, you can highlight some of those content that can help to learn. So, for example, when somebody has a question about how do I do that, you can point to the video, the micro video, that explain how you do that, so it's faster. And if you do that in the team, in Microsoft Teams, the question will be visible and the answer will be visible to everybody, so everybody will learn. Um, but sometimes you you have specific scenarios, specific use cases, and you can ask champions to build a how-to video. So I call that how-to community video. So it's really easy to screen capture your computer today. And so, I don't think everybody's going to do that. I don't think everybody's going to be feel comfortable. But what I'm doing right now is really simple. I use PowerPoint to screen capture a video, and I talk over it. And if you don't want to talk over it, you just screen capture the video, and that way the champions can showcase the scenario, the use case that you want to share with other people, and that might help a lot of people. So you won't have a lot of champions who are going to do that, but put that as an option. And what is important is to put that as an option because some people will do it and be passionate about it, but put the framework over it. So don't be, don't. I think it's important not to make people scared of doing it by asking them to be very professional, to be very structured. Let them do how they want to do it, and share it with the champions. Don't judge people who share a video if it's good or not. If it's useful, it's great. If it's not useful, it's not a big deal. But you might give some recommendations, maybe to explain how to better capture a video, but let people do how they want to capture. And if you can add, if you can maybe add some structure along the way, you can maybe add a logo to begin the video with, maybe a pitch to highlight this video. I don't know. There's so many options, but let people start with what they're comfortable with. You want them to contribute, so let them feel free about how to capture those videos. Also, a lot of things are said during the meetings, so you need to record the meetings and share the recording with the champions. That's an important resources. And finally, there are surveys, and there might be other resources I didn't list there, but you need to define what you want to do. That's the process is, yeah, okay. Here, among all those resources, what are the resources I want to use? So, for example, surveys is important because you can solicit champions to have their feedback, and that's another resource that I use often, and not only to collect some feedback, but also to quiz people about a subject. It's another way to train people. So define uh, what you want to do in the champions program regarding the resources. And then you have the recruitment. So you need to recruit champions. So here are some criteria that I usually use. I will say that you will need to have a representative community of your workforce. So I will say between 2 and 5% of your workforce should be in the program. It might differ if you're a huge company, but not even sure. At least you need to have 1 or 2 representatives per department. It depends on the size of the department sometimes, but it's important to each department has a representative in the champions community. And I will start with a 4 hours minimum per month involvement. So champions, it's not huge. It's just an hour per week. It gives room for people to get organized, but I think it's important to set, some to set some expectations of the minimum what you're expecting from people. So in some industries, people are billable, so you need to, define that really clearly at the beginning. And also, I think everybody wants to be able to measure how they will be involved. And quite frankly, we see champions involving way more because they're more passionate. They want to help others, and people who are less involved. So it depends, but uh, give some guidance around that. Um, uh, when you recruit your champions, there are several criteria that I presented in my video, but previous video. But I think the main thing is to have some people who are volunteer and not voluntold for sure, and people who are passionate. I think they don't have to be very tech savvy. They definitely not. They shouldn't be technophobic, but hard skills are easy to learn. Soft skills are hard to learn. So try to focus on the soft skills, and the Champions program will educate them on the hard skills. And finally, understand that the Champions program should always be open. That's why I think you should have a large group of champions, because we know that people won't come all the time. We know that some people will drop, some people will be more effective than others. And people will drop for bad reasons and for good reasons. Bad reasons, or let's start with the good reason. Good reasons. So good reasons are that people don't have time because they're so busy with their work, and even though they're good champions, they don't really have time. So that's a good reason not to drop the champions program. The bad reason is, people have been voluntold, or people are not, you know, they they they're not convinced by this program, so they're not involved. And there are good reasons. People thought they were good, and to educate other people, and finally they felt they were not good enough, or they didn't feel comfortable enough. So there will be ins and outs during the champions program. And that's why I think you need to have this recruitment always open. The word of mouth will work, and don't be judgment if don't judge people um, regarding the fact that they're not coming, or they're try to discuss with them. If they're not coming, understand the reason. If it's just temporary, or if there's more much an issue, don't put pressure. So it's fine if they don't come to the champions program anymore. What you need is to find another champion to replace them. So maybe they have some insights about that. And the recruitment process is, first share the criteria with the managers, so they can select who could be part of the champions program, and ask the managers who they think they will be the most accurate for this program, with those criteria in mind. So it's really important to share those criteria very clearly with the managers, so they understand it, that they don't, just pick up the person who doesn't have a lot of work to do that. You really want to have some passionate people and volunteer people. So I think that's when you and to see if they're volunteer, you need to expose those criteria. So it means if you volunteer, you need to spend 4 hours per month doing that. You need to commit to that. So go through the measure, and then an important step is to, when you have the champions, you need to map the champions per department, because you need to see if there are some spots that are not covered, and if there's some spots that are not covered, um, share it transparently, because usually managers don't like to see that in their department there's no champion, even if they think I don't need a champion. When they see that other department has a champion, they might change their mind. So there might be some emulation here. Um, and finally, when you have this list, give visibility, share uh, within the organization who is the champion of which department, so that people can know who they can contact to get support and training and stuff like that. So let's talk about the main activities and the gifts and gets in little bit more details of what a what a champion gets. So what we recommend is also, again, uh, try find out if it fits to your culture, but recommend office hours. So office hours are sessions, usually an hour, where people come and ask any question about the project. It can be technical question. It can be a project-oriented question. It can be a feature question. So that's a place where people can come, and they can come for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour if they want to stay all the time and listen to the other questions, and where you try to give the answers. And if you don't have the answers, you'll contact them later with the answers. So that's a safe place where people can come without be judging, and they can ask any questions. That's really important to do that around the migration phase, before and during and after a little bit. During those office hours, I think that's really key, because what I've seen, what I experiment is when you do that prior to the deployment, you can decrease the level of stress, because when you're starting, there's some questions before the meeting, before the deployment, that people didn't understand really what was going on, and they're stressed about the project, so they can come and ask questions, and you can address those questions and tackle those questions, just to make people at ease. And after and during, it's more about, usually it's more about, how it's working. I have issues, can I ask you questions? And people learn a lot about it. And what I've seen is people are more engaged in office hours sessions than other sessions, quite frankly. People are more engaged because they know that everybody has a voice, everybody can come and ask a question. Then there are the community calls. So community calls is more, to have a community discussion, and mostly it's to give them the project updates, where are we with the project. Sometimes when you into sessions, especially when you have some experience, you ask people to give some feedback about how they use the technology, what are their success, what are their failures. So it's a safe place where people can share some insights. But also, quite frankly, a lot of time there's some, not training, but some demonstration. So that's where you're going to highlight what's important. Go to set of instruction, for example, walk them through how to use the technology, the new technology, and maybe sometimes you're going to also talk about, some guidance, some guidelines. What are the behaviors around the use of these technologies? So that's, community calls and training might be blended sometimes. And finally, the champions, a champion gets some resources. So I listed all the resources before, but also the community support. I think that's really important. The community support, if you really can have a DL is not easy to use, but if you have a Teams, I really recommend to use Teams because that's where people can ask questions and the team can answer those questions. The project teams can answer those questions. But what's interesting, the champions after some champions will help other champions before the project team because maybe they solve the question faster than the project team and maybe they have the answer. So that creates some bonds inside the community and where people can help each other, not just the project team. And they get some rewards. And so, the rewards can be, I've seen so many rewards, different rewards can be, money on your paycheck. It can be a gift card. It can be a lot of things. It can be swags. I saw very different swags. I saw, I think a few years ago, I saw M&Ms with the logo of the project printed on the M&Ms. I saw T-shirts. I saw masks recently, mask with the logo of the Champions logo on the mask. So many swag that you can also leverage as a reward, but the reward also can be, public recognition, stuff like that, some visibility, and what the champion is need to give. So they learn something from the project team and from each other. Now they need to scale the change. The whole goal of of the champions community is to scale the change. So now they need to do potentially a set of activities that you need to present to them and let them decide what is the best depending on their context, but present them that they could do also office hours for their coworkers. They could do lunch and learns to their coworkers. So lunch and learn is more, some demonstration about the new technology. They should support their coworkers. So maybe they could also create a community, or you can have a global community where everybody can go and they can go into this community and ask a question there. Uh, and also they need to, for sure, they when they need to give, they need to give their time to attend all those project meetings, but also they need to, during those project meetings, they need to share their experience, share the feedback, be transparent and honest about what's going on. There's no judgment. We're trying here to help people. So if they're failing, tell they're failing and why they feel they're failing. Because when you share things, then it can trigger, especially in a community, it can trigger some ideas from other champions to help them, and maybe they went through the same issues and they found a solution. But if you're not sharing, if you're hiding your problems, it's hard to resolve them, to solve them. So share experience, and during the program, you need to adjust. That's that's a pillar of a digital transformation. If you think that you're going to do a project and it will work and it will be perfect, you're probably wrong. So you need to adjust your program. So to adjust, the first thing is to measure it, and I think it's important to measure success and failures. It's not just focusing on Success. So ask champions to share success and failures. So that first way is if you don't, if you don't have data, ask ask people, just ask people, and you'll see there. If you don't, if they feel safe, if you don't feel judged, they will tell you, I have some issue. I don't know why in my department people are not using this technology, and this is why I think they're not using the technology. And having this discussion will help to solve the problem. And then you need to measure it. So how do you measure? What do you measure? And how do you leverage the measurements? is important. So I think you should measure benefits. So it's you define what how you define the benefits. It's a vague question, but try to find, if it's measurable. Try to find, for example, I use the fact that when you're switching to Teams, all the conversation in Teams is not anymore in Outlook. So I measure the email that people didn't receive in their inbox, that is polluting their inbox, that are now in Teams, and I'll say, you saved this month, you saved 1,000 mails, 1,000 emails. But try to find other benefits if you can measure them. Also, measure the adoption. So uh, adoption, I should say, the consumption of your platform. So if you have metrics like in Office 365, you have dashboard, you know how people are using the technology. If you're using Teams, chat, the meetings, you can see a lot of indicators in the Office 365 dashboard, usage dashboard. So you can measure if people are consuming the technology as you thought they are. There are also, if you're using Viva Insights, this is a very powerful platform where you have way more insights about, the size of the meeting, the length of the meetings. If people are working after hours, you can anticipate burnout due to that. You can focus on, you can silo information by department. It's unidentified, so you cannot know who, but you can know per department. You can extract some patterns of behavior, well-being behaviors, and see if if there are problems. So use Viva Insight to measure that also, if you have Viva Insight. And you can also measure the training consumption. So if you have an LMS, or if you have Evolve platform, our platform, our micro learning platform, we provide, for example, statistics around dashboards around what training was consumed the most, and you can correlate if training was consumed, did it raise the consumption of the tool, and make some correlation of the impact of the training and promote the training more. Um, and there are other measurements that you can leverage in this platform. And finally, do a survey for champion satisfaction survey. Um, so that's going to be important to measure transparently and share the results of this survey with the team. And you want to be sure that people are satisfied. If they're not satisfied, they tell it, and they tell why, and that will help you to adjust. Also, uh, adjusting adjusting the intensity during the program. Sometimes you're gonna ask a lot of things to the champions, or champions will be solicited maybe more than other times, depending on their workload for sure, but also depending on the what you're deploying. Um, because sometimes some technology are more intensive in terms of education, in terms of communication, others are not. So adjust your program. If you can have a framework where you say, okay, we'll meet every week or every month or every other week. But sometimes you can say, okay, we're gonna this month we're gonna just have one meeting, but in 3 months we're gonna have four, because that's gonna be more intensive. So adjust, and also listen to the people. If there's for whatever reason a moment where people cannot come because there's a lot of activity, try to adjust also your program if there's a lot of champions who cannot attend. But it's still good to have a recurring meeting that is set in stone, and record the meeting, and at least so people can come back if they didn't have time to come to this meeting. So adjust this way. And finally, celebrate. Celebrate. It's important to create boundaries, to create some friendship, relationship, bonds in the committee, you need to celebrate. So um, you can celebrate different ways. So first you can spotlight, and that's what we often do with Champions Committee, where you spotlight somebody who had a great experience and share it with the people in the champions in the committee, because you want this experience to be shared and eventually leveraged by all the champions. So spotlight the champion, reward with the reward that you can provide. Discuss with HR what kind of reward you can have. You can, there's several ways to reward people and recognize. That's important. It's some sort of reward, but recognize people, give them visibility. It's important when the manager recognizes the fact that the champions had an impact. So the project team should discuss with the manager, saying, "Hey, your champion is really awesome. He's very impactful, helping each other, helping his peers. So be aware of that. And maybe you can do something." And finally, have fun. Have fun during the committee calls, but have fun once in a year. Organize a meeting where people, if you can, with COVID it's complicated, but if you can meet in person, have lunch together. We do, for example, at Planet, we do sometimes we do an after hours. After 5, we have from time to time we have a meeting where we do stuff that has nothing to do with work. It's just games or listen to music or there's always a framework around it, just to stay engaged. And but we have some quizzes and funny quizzes where I try to answer questions, and and at the end there's a prize for the winner. So it's always fun, and it's a way to discuss, have small talks, because you can chat and you can talk, you can turn on your camera if you want or not. We had the one where we used a filter on our camera, so it learned also. We learned this way. We learned how to use a filter on our camera, and we used the filter. And the idea was to try out some filters that were fun. So have that in mind. I think this celebrate is key from time to time, and having this open spirit to go further with the Champions program and create some bonds between people so they can get excited, happy to work with this committee. And quite frankly, wherever I saw a Champions program, it's very impactful. It helps to scale the challenge. People are usually satisfied. Not everybody, for sure, because some people don't have the time. Some people have been voluntold, but most of the time it's successful if you make the energy in it and if you focus on the right initiatives. And that's the step by steps that I wanted to go through with you to discuss that. Hope it was helpful.